Reactive training systems.
So today we're talking to Suzy Hartwig Gary. Let me start off with her actually super impressive list of accolades. So Suzy's a 27-time national champion. You got that? You heard that right the first time. 27 times. She's also been an IPF Open World Champion, Masters World Champion. She's competed at the World Games twice. She's the current holder of the IPF Open World Record squat. That's at 50 years of age as well. And also has world records in the M1 equipped division, the M1 total. She's a USA Powerlifting Women's Hall of Fame member, referee, the list goes on and on. And actually more recently, she's been really involved in coaching U.S. national teams, coaching the Raw Open team from 2016. And so Suzy, my history with Suzy goes back, to my beginnings as a powerlifter, really. Like, I remember before I even had done a real competition, seeing Suzy in Powerlifting USA. And I remember noticing at the time that it was her because of the unique spelling of her name, Sioux-Z. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the episode. So that's honestly the first time that I came in contact with Suzy's lifting. We were in more direct contact later on in my career, notably at the 2009 World Games. She helped me quite extensively, coaching me and handling me that day, and on, honestly. She's helped me as far as helping my mental game as an athlete and a competitor, and she's just been a real joy and a real pleasure to a great person to know. And I hope that comes through especially well in the chat that we had today, and hope that you guys enjoy this episode.
Oh, okay.
So Suzy, one of the reasons, Mike and I have been talking about doing this podcast for a while is just sort of, he and I are both sort of fans of the game, and I've always been talking about at different events about people that have been lifting, that have been in the sport for a really long time, that we look up to and that we've talked about and talked to. And the genesis of this podcast was to kind of reach out to folks. And to be honest, you're one of the first names that popped into our mind, having been in it for so long and had so much achievement, so many world championships, national championships, lifted equipped, lifted raw, been through a lot of different things. So that was the genesis of it. And, for people that may or may not know who you are, I'd love to kind of hear just a little history of how you got into the sport and sort of your journey to this point, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, my introduction to knowing that I liked weights was, I was a kid. I was maybe 10 years old or something. And my friend's older brother had weights in the basement, and all the guys were trying to pick it up and couldn't. And we were teasing them. And then they're like, all right, smarty pants, you do it. And I assumed I wouldn't be able to. And I walked over and I picked it up. It was like 110 pounds, but I think I weighed about 80 pounds at the time. So I was like, this is really cool. And then in track, when I was a freshman, so I guess it was 12, they had us squat and bench on a Monday. And then Wednesday we did it again. And Friday they tested us. I guess they were trying to see who had good upper and lower body strength. And I did a double body weight squat and a body weight bench. And I was like, this is really cool. I don't even know what I'm doing. I want to do this. And was told, oh, we have a really small weight room. It's not for the girls. The football players need it. So they had actually, tested us just to see what we might do well in track. But because I was a girl, there wasn't enough room for me in the gym. So it wasn't until I almost graduated college and I was working at Mount Rushmore, and we had a universal machine in the basement. We all lived in a dormitory. And I joined some guys one day, and this guy goes, man, you're strong. You should be a power lifter. And I was like, cool, what's that? So I started training about 3 months before graduating college. And I did 3 competitions over 4 weeks because in South Dakota, of course, they were all at the same time. And I got bit by the bug. And then I actually moved out to the East Coast to be a nanny so I could be around other powerlifting. And that was in 1991. So that's when I first started. I did 3 meets in 91.
Wow.
And then,
so what federation was that at the time? Was that USPF or ADFPA or?
So I did 2 ADFPAs and 1 USPF. I did the 3 meets that were possible. So I started out, I did research right before I moved, and I looked at it like the ADFPA was the semi-pros and the USPF were the pros when I was looking at like the numbers of what people could do. And so when I decided to commit to one, and I actually did local competitions of both, but my first nationals that I did was ADFPA, and that was in 1993. And it was really exciting because nobody knew who I was. And then I had it 1 after second deadlifts. I was a bit surprised. It was awesome. And I missed my first 2 benches because the guy who was lifting off to me kept picking me up with the weight and dropping me on the bench. And I was so nervous, I didn't even realize that was happening. And his wife was a competitor, the weight group over me. And she ran out and she's like, he's picking you up. And so we practiced in the back, him not picking me up. And then I got my 3rd bench, praise the Lord. And right before I'd gotten it, someone had told my mom that if I didn't get the bench, I'd be out of the meet. So then she started to freak out. But that was fun. So my first world championships was actually the WDFPF Worlds associated with the ADFPA. And that was in 93 in Canada.
So you were around for that transition from the IPF coming over to the ADFPF and the ADFPF kind of transitioning to the USAPL, right?
Yes. In 1997, what they were going to do is the USPF, who used to be the IPF affiliate, I switched over to competing there after about 2 years in the ADFPA because I wanted to compete against the best in the world. And like when I went to the ADFPA, the WDFPF Worlds, there were maybe 9 countries there. So I decided I'd rather lose against the best in the world than win against, the other people. Cause I'd won the first year at the WDFPF Worlds. But in 97, they were trying to combine the USPF and the ADFPA, and they were going to become one organization called the USAPL. But some things went on in the IPF Congress, and the people that were in charge of the USPF, they just kind of got fed up with them and said, you're out of here. So the USPF was knocked out, and then the ADFPA, more or less, they became the USAPL. So they switched their name because originally the 2 were going to be combined. And that was a real interesting year because I'd finally won my first USPF Nationals in 1997. I'd finally made a team to the IPF Worlds. And then they had the meeting in November. And then I get a call. Oh, by the way, you're not on the team anymore. You have to go to the USAPL Nationals and win to get back your team slot that you had. Yeah. Yeah. And I had like 6 weeks or something before that nationals.
Oh my goodness. So that's a quick prep.
Yeah. It wasn't pretty. And I didn't do that well. I didn't even cut to my weight class. Forgetting that the weight class above me were the 2 strongest people from the US. And so I got 3rd. No, actually I got 4th, but the girl who got 3rd failed for like 10 different drugs. So I ended up with 3rd. And yeah, I mean, it was crazy because you walked in and you thought, oh my gosh, because it was the first USAPL Nationals. And I went, yeah, she'll be drug tested. It was crazy. But the top two gals weren't gonna, one of them went and the second place winner couldn't go. And they said, well, you're usually a 105er. If you cut weight, we'll take you to Worlds. So I cut weight, and my first IPF Worlds was in 98. But it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't even a question for me, though. I'd worked so hard to try to make it to the IPF that when it switched and ADFPA, now USAPL, became the new affiliate, I switched immediately.
Someone was telling me that there was concern in the ADFPF that IPF wasn't as sort of strict about drug testing at the time as they were, and there was a concern of like becoming part of that whole culture. Does that resonate with you, or do you remember anything like that? Or
well, a little bit. I had been not competing in ADFPA for a while. And I know there were people that were like, well, they don't test as much, because back in the USPF, they always tested at nationals. And it was usually they tested winners and then maybe second place. And the IPF at the time would test the world champions and world records. And that was pretty much it. So I know there was concern by some people. But then they also talked about how they could, at least in the US, test more. So there was a little bit of concern, and it was very obvious in the beginning. If you came over from any organization other than the ADFPA into the USAPL, they tested you. I mean, I got fourth at nationals, and they tested first through fourth in my weight class. We were the only ones tested that day, partially because the first two scored so well. The third one looked very, crazy. And then I'm sure they suspected me because I went from ADFPA to USPF. Right. But, I think at that point I'd been tested at every single meet I'd ever competed in. So, it's second nature to me. I couldn't even count how many times I've been tested. Yeah. So
what was it like competing back then when it was sort of more loose with the people on performance enhancing drugs and stuff versus now? And I feel like you walk around a meet at USAPL or IPF or NAPF, it's pretty clear that most of the lifters are not on anything, but you look back at those old videos and some of the old nationals and stuff like that, and people look way different than they do now in terms of fit and finish, especially the bigger guys and stuff like that. And as a lifetime, drug-free lifter, what were you thinking of those times, or how did you kind of process that?
When I first started lifting, I was super naive until I met a friend who was a bodybuilder who started schooling me on what to look for. And just because you're clean doesn't mean everybody else is, because I figured I was working hard. I was lifting heavy weights. Why couldn't they? I didn't suspect people until I started meeting women that look like men. But really, honestly, when I first started, my goal was to one day be third at Worlds, because I knew I was clean and so many weren't. And I didn't notice it as much in the US as I did at Worlds, but I really just wanted to compete against the best. And sometimes it was irritating because it's like, dang it, I could be winning if, they weren't doing that. Yeah. But I wasn't willing to change my standards. So that was it. That was my goal. It was to make top 3 clean. And then it was nice because, I don't know how it happened. God just blessed me in 2003 when I won the Open IPF Worlds for the first time. Actually the only time for the Open. And I saw a big change, a big shift after, I think it was 2006, when they showed up unannounced to the Russian and the Ukrainian nationals. And I believe it was 18 out of 19 people that they tested failed. So I had previously had conversations with some people that no longer competed that were from the Ukraine and Russia. And one of the gals had said, when she was a kid, maybe she was 12 or 13, when she realized some of the vitamins she'd been given for years were actually steroids, like in pill form. So it was something that happened obviously, organized, because you don't have that many people fail, all but one. And after that, you definitely noticed a shift because more countries started testing. And there'd always been a couple that tested, but you saw a shift. So at least it wasn't like they knew the one day a year they had to be clean. And I feel like with the raw lifting also, because you had so many more new people in the sport, they weren't competing against people that were using enhancement. So I'm not saying that obviously it's everywhere. And, because we try to be a drug-free sport, but you can't catch everyone or stop everyone. But with all the other organizations out there that don't test, I always tell people just go there.
Yeah. Agreed.
But
well, one thing, first of all, I guess I remember when that happened, the 2006, showing up unannounced, and then the subsequent national bans for Russia and the Ukraine. It made for, that was my second Junior Worlds that year. It made for an interesting competition. So you were talking about your attitude, like as you approach competition, and that, you were thinking, if I could just get on the podium, kind of understanding the landscape. And then since then, you've been able to do, more than that. You've been able to win at the international level, and like as drug testing has changed and evolved over the years, I guess I'm interested in hearing a bit about, has your attitude, has your outlook on things changed? I remember after the 2014 Worlds in South Africa, I remember being really disappointed with my own placement and talking to you about it, and you kind of helped me frame it in a way that was really helpful, because I lifted well, but I just wasn't real happy with how it placed. And I remember talking to you about focusing on the things that were in my control. And if you lift well, then you lift well and you place where you place. So is that still kind of how you look at it, or has it changed over the years? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am competitive in pretty much everything I do in life. So I want to place as high as possible. And, it wasn't that I was like willing to accept third. I just thought in the beginning that that was the best I could do against the fact that so many other people were using enhancements. But my attitude is really still the same. Like, I tell people, one of my favorite moments, one of my proudest competitions was at World Games. And that was when I placed 7th out of 10. Now, it was 3 weight classes combined, but I went in and I tied my world record squat. I tied my PR bench, and I was told by the audience I was the favorite deadlifter, even though I was probably the worst deadlifter, but they liked my setup. But I went 9 for 9 in Taiwan, and I had the meet of my life, and I lifted the best I could lift, and I was ecstatic, but I knew going into it I wasn't going to win. And if I remember correctly, that's when the first U.S. man in forever won, you, Mike, and it was so exciting, because also I remember I was handling you, and I'm worried about wrapping your knees how you want them, and you're like, oh, no, I wrap them myself. And I'm like, do you want me to roll the wraps? No, I got it. I just leave them like this. So
wrap flying everywhere.
Exactly. And I thought, man, I've never had it so easy handling someone, because I've wrapped a lot of knees, and you didn't need that, but it was such a great experience. And I placed 7th, and there have been times where I've won a Master World Championships and been a little bit let down because I missed my last deadlift. It's like I'm happy overall, but I'm like, dang it, if I would have moved my foot, or dang it, when it's a technical thing that I did wrong, if I try something and the strength wasn't quite there that day, then I can almost accept it better than if I did something technically wrong and missed because of that, if that makes sense. So still, as long as I know that I did the best I could possibly do that day, where I place doesn't really affect me as much mentally as placing well and not performing well.
That makes sense. You're sort of responsible for the effort, but the outcome is in the universe or God's hands, you know?
Exactly, because I can only be as strong as I am. And if there's somebody out there that is pound for pound stronger and lifts well, then I did what I could do. There's nothing else I could do about it. And I think a lot of people out there are so afraid of, well, how well I'm going to do. I have a new client who signed up for his first meet, went to the Arnold, and then was like, oh, I'm not strong enough to compete yet. He's like, because I want to be competing here one day. And I'm like, well, your first step to competing at the Arnold is showing up at a competition, you know. But I know you all have run into a lot of people where, you know, they want to wait until they're good enough to win before they even compete.
I have some friends that want to be strong enough before they go to the gym.
Oh, gosh.
You know what I'm saying? Like they want to do a certain amount of like working out at home before they walk in because they don't want to embarrass themselves. So that's not it. I mean, get in there and just start working. The journey of 1,000 miles is sort of trite, but it starts with one step, you know, and in all walks of life, whether it be powerlifting or any kind of journey that you're on.
Exactly. And, you know, the crazy thing is all these people think that everyone's going to be staring and looking at them. And the truth is they're probably going to just go unnoticed for a while in the gym because there's so many other people there training.
Exactly right. You know, Mike is saying that in a way, it sounds like he learned a lot of lessons from you personally in terms of how to frame things like this. And I'm kind of wondering, when you first started getting started in the sport and sort of midway through your career, were there people that you looked up to or that you took lessons from, similar to kind of how Mike was saying he learned from you in South Africa?
Yeah, I was interested in this too.
Oh, well, gosh, I wish I'd known I had this question to start with. No. As far as lifters, honestly, I don't think any lifters, but like in life, my mom was always so positive and always said, you know, as long as you try your best, you should always be really proud. You can't compare yourself to everybody else. You know, I was always really short. Doesn't matter you're short. You can't be taller. You can't control it. Do what you can control. Different things like that. So I think it was kind of just more from my parents telling me to be the best I can be. And more so than lifters, because I was very blessed that like from the get-go, I've always see the positive side of everything. Matt always said if I lost a leg, I'd be like, well, thank God I have another one. You know, and that's kind of like the attitude that I have. Yeah. So no specific lifters help me like in the mental mindset so much.
Was there anyone you looked up to just in the strength game in general or in the iron game? You said, man, that person's pretty cool.
When I first started competing, once I left South Dakota, I lived in Virginia for a short while. And Bettina Altizer, who is now, she's a lawyer and she's involved in the USAPL still. She's a referee. She doesn't compete as much, but she was competing then. And she had a rocking bench press and was just really nice. And she happened to be local, so I ran into her at local meets. And I just really looked up to her because she was always just pushing hard and trying to be better. And I got to know her a little bit. So I looked up to her, and that's when I was starting out in the ADFPA. And when I started the USPF, like the females that really stuck out, Carrie Boudreau, you may not have even heard of her because she was only around for a few years, but she was champion of champion at the IPF Worlds when she was around. And she switched over to Olympic weightlifting. Oh. And actually did pretty good there. And then as it would be, a couple years into my career, I stumbled on to Kirk Kawasaki. And if you haven't heard of him, you should probably get out a little more. But he just really showed me that you could be really, really focused. Like he was almost more focused than I would, want to be, because he would think about his squat that he was doing. Like for a week, he'd be ramping up for the squat, and I would be totally exhausted if I did that. I honestly don't think about the lift that I'm doing typically till I get to the gym, because for me personally, I know I would be exhausted if I was ramping myself up for it always. So actually learn some things not to do, and then also what to do. He was such a perfectionist when we were training together that of all the years, I think we trained together 6.5 years. One time he said to me, that was a perfect lift. One time. I circled it in my calendar because it was always, I was like, what was wrong with that? Could have been faster. What was wrong with that? There was always, and so he helped me to really make each lift try to be as perfect as it could be, because everyone else would say, gosh, that was awesome. And he'd be like, yeah, you could change this. So he really influenced me a lot. And I was just, blessed. The people, when I first started, you're running into people like Brad Gillingham. He started a little bit after I did. He did some USPF also. Well, Ed Cohn, if you haven't heard of him, so it's like the people I was hanging out with were all these people that were competing at IPF Worlds because I had dated Kirk. So we'd show up to USPF Nationals, and, you've got Tony Harris and Dave Ricks, and, it was incredible. All the people, there weren't as many females that stuck out in the beginning. But then later, as I'd been doing it for a while, you had people like Priscilla Rivet coming up, and Leanne Blinn and Liz Willett. And so she hasn't been competing for a while now, but it's, and Jennifer Maley, who a lot of people don't know, because she was a rising star as a junior, and then she had a child and didn't compete much more after that. But it's been amazing, because I've seen so many fabulous lifters come and go, with a couple of us sticking around.
It kind of leads into, I don't know if Mike is thinking the same thing, but, what do you attribute the longevity that you have? Do you have any sort of thoughts in terms of, it seems like you keep achieving? I'm not sure if you still have it, but I believe you had the world record squat, open world record squat.
I do.
Recently. Do you still have it?
I do, and it's the one thing on my checklist. I don't want to just have it when I'm 50. I want to break it when I'm 50. Because
you're 50 years old and you have the open overall world record IPF squat.
Yes, in raw.
Just anyone listening, just hear that out, right? That's extremely significant.
But I was 48 when I did it, so that's my goal. Even if it's like unofficial at a different meet. I was so close. And then I actually hurt my hamstring in January last year, or my squat was rocking. But I think there's a few things that with the longevity, the first thing is being drug-free, because it may help you be bigger, stronger, faster, but it does a lot of stuff to your body. And I don't think you see too many people that are, enhancing, sticking around for a really long time, because it beats your body up. So that's part of it. I am a true believer in massage, chiropractic, physical therapy. When I'm feeling well, I try to get a massage every 4 to 6 weeks, and I go to the chiropractor every 4 to 6 weeks, even if I'm feeling well. But then if something's going on, I go and I get more treatments. I joke that luckily I'm not into clothes. I'm not into things, because I spend all the money on my body. And then I guess lastly, when I first started, I look now and I was probably holding myself back a little bit, but without regrets now, because I'm still competing. But we used to just, when Kirk was helping me, it was like you hit all your lifts, And then at the next meet, you tried to do 2.5 kilos more. So every meet, I would be adding like 2.5 kilos more on 1 or 2 of my lifts, or maybe 3 in the beginning. And that was just how the training was set up. It was a progressive overload. So I wasn't trying to get super fast, super strong. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but many times people push their body past the brink, and in a year or 2, they're getting injuries. I mean, they're young and they've been training 2 years and they have a shoulder injury and a hip injury and this and that. And I think it's because their body hasn't had time to acclimate to how strong they're getting, their joints and everything like that. So even though it may have held me back just a little, I think that in the beginning, my lifts skyrocketed the first year because, newbies get huge ones. After that, I was taught slow progressive gains. And I think that's why I've sustained it also, because I wasn't pushing my body to the absolute brink every time. Go ahead.
That's an interesting point, actually. I wonder about that as well. Like, is getting strong as fast as possible the best way? That seems to be, for lifting nerds like myself, it seems to be kind of the implied goal a lot of times. But, I mean, it's a good point. Like, there's other things going on besides, just muscular adaptation, neuromuscular adaptation, and we always kind of pay lip service to that connective tissue health, joint health, and things like that. But that stuff takes a while to adapt as well. And you might have something there.
Oh, well, by accident, but no.
How has your training philosophy sort of evolved from, 1993 to 2019?
Well, it was funny because the people that first helped me my first year were just like, okay, put some weight on the bar and lift it, had really taught me nothing. I moved out here, and this is just a confession of how stupid and naive that I was. I hadn't hardly been lifting, and I was squatting raw at the time. I was a 105er. I was squatting like 250, pulling around 300, or maybe 264 squat, 300. And I was only benching like 140 pounds or something. And then, people gave me equipment, and the next thing you know, I'm squatting around 3. I'm still deadlifting around 3. And I was benching 170. And I was like, man, my bench is so weak. Not knowing that obviously your bench should be less than your squat and your deadlift. But there were no females really competing in South Dakota. So I would enter the men's division because it was called open. And the people were like, oh, well, that's for men and women. So I was competing against guys too. Well, in college, I was beating the guys because if you're a 114-pound guy in college, you're probably a string bean. But then when I was competing against grown adults, their bench was so much better than mine. So I moved out to Virginia, and I'm like, every time I went in the gym, I benched because I figured my bench was really weak. I needed to make it stronger. And then the irony was I did a meet like 2 months later, and I broke the American record in the bench. So nice. I realized it wasn't quite as bad as I thought. So I had no philosophy in the beginning. A bodybuilder said, I just been noticing, and he said, I know nothing about powerlifting, but I'm seeing you squat like every other week, deadlift every other week, and bench every day that you come in. So he said, you need to do squat once a week, deadlift once a week, bench twice a week. And that was kind of what everybody used to do. And it was always simple progressive overload, at least in the United States. You figured out you had to meet in 10 weeks, so you backed off your weight amounts for 10 weeks, and then you just ramped up. And that was how we always did it. And then as things evolved and more training programs evolved, I did too. I tried a variety of things. And then Matt started helping me out with my training. We did more like undulating periodization, things like that. So the philosophy, I mean, I used to just go in and it was super simple. And if it was on the piece of paper, I did it. It says do this, do this. So now I've tried RPEs and I'm terrible at it. God bless all of you who can do it. I think it's a great idea. I changed and I made a Suzy hybrid. So as an example, I was doing 264 in the squat for triples. And I knew I could do 5, but I felt like I was working. But I was like, I could do 5, right? So one day I went in and my first set felt off. So I only did a single. And then my second one, something felt a little weird. So I only did a double. And I was doing 5 sets. And I went into it on my 5th set. I'm finally feeling good. Maybe I'll make up a rep or 2 if I can, since I missed them in the other sets. And then I did 7. And Matt made a comment that if I wouldn't be in such bad shape and could have been breathing, I probably could have done more. And so the next week I did 12.
Wow.
Now it was 80% at the time. And when I was doing 3, I thought I could probably do 5, maybe 6. And then the next week I did 12. So I'm so built to squat that I don't know until the rep finally feels different than the one before that I only have one more left. So now instead what I'll do, it'll kind of be like a RPE of how did that set feel, and maybe I'll do more sets. But if I try to guess how many reps I have left in the tank, I'm terrible. But I've changed by how I feel, just because it says 3, just because I can do 3. If something feels really wrong and I can't fix it, I just rack it and I just do another set or something like that. So I'd say that's the biggest change is I really listen to my body more. And also part of it might be because I'm older, so my body talks to me more.
Well, it's an interesting part too about the RPE. I know you and I have talked about this for years, and like even looking at bar speed data, which usually, even if you're not that great at knowing, like intuiting what your RPE is, the bar speed data can tell you. But we've looked at yours and that doesn't show any sort of fatiguing either. So yeah,
I know.
I'm with you on that one.
I know I'm such an oddball. I know so many people that it works for well. And it's interesting that you mentioned the bar speed, because Matt will look at his and he'd hit below a 0.3 in the squat and he'd be like, oh man, maybe I have one more single in me after this. And then I'll do a set and I do a set of 5 and they're all like 0.19, 0.17, 0.19. It makes no sense. Sometimes mine will get faster as I'm going.
That does make no sense, but
yeah. Well, because I think I'm feeling it out to make sure, like, if there's something that's bothering me, and then I do a couple and I'm like, oh, I got this. And then I just write, or I'm like, oh crap, I've got 3 more. I better speed up because they're getting hard. I don't know.
Yeah.
So do you do any conditioning, Suzy, or you stick to just the weights?
I should do conditioning, but most of the time, if I try to even get on a treadmill or the elliptical, being as we own the gym, I always get interrupted. So for a short while, a year ago, I had someone doing my macros for me for 6 months, and he wanted me to do at least twice a week of 20 to 30 minutes of easy cardio. So I was doing probably 3 times a week where I was just doing really easy cardio. I've really been bad about it the last couple years, but what I used to do for conditioning would be instead kettlebell swings or something called Tabatas, where you do something for a certain amount of time and then you rest for that small amount of time and then you do it again and you keep repeating. I used to jump rope a lot, and then I had a shoulder problem, so I haven't. But so my conditioning was more by doing endurance type training while lifting in short spurts, like jump rope and swings and stuff like that.
Gotcha. And what about like accessories and supplements? Do you stick to the main lifts, or do you get extra volume in after the fact, or how do you approach that?
I am, and it's become more and more, especially because I've been dealing with different things, but I stick mainly to the main lifts and or variations. So if I'm squatting, it's mainly the squat, but sometimes I will throw in pause squats or tempo squats, safety bar squats. I don't do front squats much just because I can't really hold the bar too well. And most people do it to make their quads stronger. And I found that my quads are part of the strongest part of me. So I kind of stay away from them because my hamstrings need more strength. So I'll do, after I do squats and deadlifts, I'll do like weighted glute ham raises or 45-degree back raises. I always do something posterior after I've done my main lift to try to balance myself out some. I don't do near the assistance that most people, but I always do some sort of abdominal work in something posterior. So if I'm benching, I might do close grip, wide grip, spoto presses, different things like that on a different day. Sometimes I'll do my regular bench followed by a close grip or a spoto, something like that, just to get some more volume in. And then I always hit posterior. So pull-ups, rows, pull downs, things like that. But not a lot of accessories, but always something to hit the posterior.
Gotcha.
I got another question. If you, Dom, I don't want to shift gears away from the training stuff. If you have more to go on that, though.
No, go for it.
So in 2012, when the IPF started doing classic competitions internationally, you were an early adopter of that, and you'd even done some Raw Unity meets prior to that, right?
Correct. I did one. And I competed Raw at the Arnold the first few years.
Oh, really? Okay. Just because that's how you preferred to do it, or?
No, the first couple of years at the Arnold, the USAPL was at the Arnold for the first time in 2008. And they had Battle of the Regions.
Right.
And then they had a very small group where you could lift Raw. This was because they just started Raw Nationals, even though people weren't doing it. So in 2000, I think I've now missed 3, but I've done every Arnold Raw because I wasn't good enough to be on the regional teams the first year, because ironically they'd include one woman and then they'd have like 7 men on a team, and they would take the top 5 Wilks to get the team score. And they'd only take the top 1 female from the region, and Leanne Lynn's Wilks was always a little bit better than mine because it used to be 4 regions. And it was crazy because my Wilks was better than half the guys on the team, but they just needed their token women back then. So I said, well, I want to lift. And so I lifted Raw. So I had done a few of those, and then I did Raw Unity in 2010.
So what made you want to do Raw Unity and then later, classic worlds and things like that? What made you want to do that?
Well, for all of those out there that haven't wore equipment, it's not necessarily fun, but I also wanted to see how strong I was without any of the extras, and also where I would fare against other people, because so many people wear their equipment insanely tight, and I will take a super, super tight knee wrap. But when I was starting and training with Kirk, the rule was you got to get your suit on yourself in 5 minutes kind of thing. So I never wore my suits and my bench shirts that tight. And then when they started coming out with the fabrics and everything that was so much stronger, I remember in 2002, I had benched 214 in the old Inzer Blast shirts. Okay. And my competitor had benched 180. Then I had a neck issue. I came back. They'd come out with the first Titan bench shirts. She was benching 220 and I was benching 220. that was the difference of the now tight shirts. And so I thought it would be really cool also to do the raw, because with the neck thing I've never really worn my shirts tight with fear of irritating my disc again. And I just figured it would be an even playing field across the board, because it isn't about who can get into the tighter equipment or anything. And also, then the numbers that you tell people, you don't have to preface it with, I'm wearing a special shirt, I'm wearing a special suit. Because I always felt bad telling people my best numbers, because they think I could walk into the gym and do my best numbers. But, I can't squat 400 raw.
Right.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, and also, I'll be honest, I love lifting, but I was starting to feel like, I don't know, maybe it was time to take a break and then come back. And then when raw came, it was like a new thing, a new experience for me to do. And it lit another fire under my tush.
Yeah.
Rumor has it that you're getting back into a suit, Suzy.
Rumor is correct. I've signed up for Equip Nationals.
Okay. The circle turns, right?
Yeah, well, I just thought, I'm 50. I should try Equipped again. I did both Equipped and Raw until 2014. But, I'll just tell people, I don't recommend as you get older and older and you're in your 40s to do, in 2012, the first year with the Raw World Cup, I did Equip Nationals toward the end of May. 3.5 weeks later, I did Raw Worlds. About 5 or 6 weeks later, I did Raw Nationals. About 5 weeks later, I did Master Equip Worlds. And 4 weeks later, I did Open Equip Worlds. So, yeah, in 5.5 months, I did 5 big meets. And I had irritated my shoulder at the first one. So I was like, after a couple years, I just decided I needed to focus on one. And I'm better at this age lifting raw than I am equipped. So I decided just to really focus on the raw for a while.
So how many meets a year are you doing now, sort of optimally, if you could set it up the way you wanted in a perfect world?
I would say 3, maybe 4. So I'm hoping to do the NAPF Raw this year. And if I were to win Equip Nationals, I would do Equip Worlds. And then I'll probably do Raw Nationals. So it would be 4. But moving forward, and then the past few years, I try not to do more than 3, because it's just, the schedule also gets together. The Raw versus the Equipped, you always end up having one shortly after the other. So I'm actually not going to go to Raw Worlds this year. I declined my spot on the team.
Gotcha. If you were going to give, I guess you probably do this all the time as you own a gym. I don't know if everybody knows this, but I know you and Matt have SSPT in Rockville, Maryland, which is an amazing gym if anyone's never been there. But what advice do you give to new lifters when they're sort of getting started and they're looking at you and seeing all your achievement and the, multiple national championships and world championships and records? What kind of advice do you give to someone just walking into the iron game?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I do end up giving a lot of people, like, I can tell they're nervous at their first nationals, or they're in the gym thinking about their first meet. And the same advice I give everyone, especially when I know it's their first meet. Look, it's going to be your best meet ever, guaranteed. Now, your next meet might be better too, but this is the only time you're ever guaranteed that it will be the best meet you've ever done. So have fun. I had a client, and he was probably only 2 or 3 pounds off of the weight class, but he was so stressed anyway. And I told him, I said, look, it's your first meet. You're getting your feet wet. Don't worry about dieting. If it comes off, it comes off. Go in, pick numbers that you can realistically do. Don't shoot for a number that you want. just because you planned it and it was on the piece of paper. If your second one was a gut buster, don't go up 10 kilos, be realistic, have fun, and get experience at competing. And it's easy to look at records and say, ooh, I want to beat that. Because look, I'll be honest, I did it too. I was like, oh, wow, I could do that. It's great to have it to strive for. But I always tell people you should also have multiple levels of goals. Have some realistic goals that you can achieve in the short term. Because it's nice to actually achieve goals. And then have some far-reaching goals so you have something that you're working toward, to build up. And at your first competitions, yeah, I'm competitive too, but don't focus on or wait until you can win. Go in, do the best you can, and then get better at your next competition. So I say the same thing when someone's at the first nationals. I'll say, it's just like any other meet, and it's the only time it'll be your best nationals ever, guaranteed. And it does kind of make people laugh, and it kind of puts them at ease. But I tell them, look, it's all about it's about the end game, and the end game isn't today. If you love lifting and you plan on doing it for a while, don't worry about achieving everything immediately. Have a little bit of patience.
Well, there's a certain skill to competing as well, right? Like you have to get better at it. And I think it's maybe not realistic to think that you're just going to walk in and on the very first day, the very first meet, or even the second or third meet, just totally get it and totally be a pro at just the process of competing. I remember competing for, years, and every time doing a competition, walking away from it and feeling like, I feel like I learned so much, and it's these things that are almost impossible to put into words. It's just gaining the experience of competing, being able to do a better job of it next time.
Exactly. And you touched on something that is another thing that I wanted to mention is you can always get something positive away from your experience, even if you had a bad meet. Sometimes people having a bad meet in the long run ends up being the best thing that happened to them, because you get people that are like winning and really successful, even though they're doing everything different every time and they're not necessarily doing things correctly, but they're just insanely naturally strong. And then they finally go to a meet and there's someone who knocks them off the pedestal, or they miss more lifts, and then they have to step back and say, oh, wait a second. What do I need to do to get better? Because I don't want this to happen again. If they end up missing lifts, or if something goes wrong at a competition, you end up getting a really whippy bar. Or one time I had to stand on a 100-pound plate and walk off it to take my squat because the squat racks didn't go low enough. I learned after that I just wasn't going to do that again, because it's very dangerous and not a good idea. But, take something away when things go wrong. Figure out how you can make it right. And when things go great, figure out how you can make it better. Like you said, Mike, it's all about becoming a better competitor. And each time you do something, hopefully you're getting better and you're taking something away from it. How many times, especially now that Raw is so huge and they're running 4 and 5 platforms. And, I ran into people who didn't have anyone handling them. And I looked at the guy and I was like, why are you warming up already? And he's like, oh man, they're like halfway through their first attempts. And I'm in the third flight, so I'm going to be going in like 15 minutes. And I said, no, they take all 3 of their attempts. And then the next group takes all 3 of theirs. And then you go. And the guy was warming up like 2 hours ahead of time because he thought everyone took their first attempts from every flight and then second ones. So another piece of advice I would tell people is study and know the rules before you go to a competition. Find somebody find somebody who's done it before, preferably done it well before, and pick their brain. And if you can't afford to hire a handler, which I really recommend, at least for your first few meets or your first big meets, because it just takes the pressure off of you. Find someone you trust to help you, because you don't want to be loading your weights, having to focus on timing, having to focus on if there's multiple platforms and things like that. And surround yourself by the type of people you want to be, not just strong people, but the people that you want to emulate. Because if you see somebody that's really, really strong, but obnoxious to everybody, or has no kind of repeatable process, you may not want to try to emulate them, because most people that perform well, that do real well, it's by creating a repeatable process and focusing on just getting a little bit better each time, instead of just going crazy and different every time, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. I had a sort of random question, Suzy, which you could tell me it's out of bounds or not, but you have a unique spelling to your first name, and I kind of wanted to hear the thought behind that. I don't know if it's related to your South Dakota roots, or I've always wondered about that. And I'm sure other people have as well.
You're pretty smart. So I will make the long story short. I was 21 or 22 in college, about to graduate, and I had gotten 4-H awards and Volunteer of the Year awards with Susan instead of Suzanne on it. I'd gotten birthday cards from friends I'd had for 15 years, spelling my name Susy, Susie, all wrong. I used to spell it Suzie. And I was pissed, and I said to one of my friends, I would think if you're getting an award or someone's been your friend for years, they would at least spell your name right. And she said, well, just change it. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to change my name, because, that's the name my parents gave me and stuff. And she's like, well, you don't have to do anything officially. And I was about to move away from South Dakota. So I was like, I'm going to spell it like the Sioux Indian, Sioux-Z. And then this way, when everyone spells it wrong, it's my fault and not because they don't care. And then I won't be upset with them. It'll be because, I spell it so differently. And so when I moved to Virginia and then Maryland, I never spelt it or wrote it any other way. So a lot of people didn't even know my name was Suzanne. And it just stuck, and it was fun. But it was bringing a little bit of South Dakota with me. And it was kind of just because of the irritation that nobody could ever spell Suzie correct.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I always kind of wondered about that.
Suzy, one other question for you, and then I'm sure you've got some other things you need to attend to. But I was wondering, having done as many competitions and international competitions and everything as you have done, is there one that sticks out to you as being your favorite in terms of meet experience? Like you mentioned, the 2009 World Games, is that your favorite one, or are there others, or what's been your favorite?
That had definitely been the favorite. And I think Belarus more recently really sticks out for me, because I performed really well. I went 9 for 9, and having to be pressure can be a tough thing for some people, and it can be a good thing for other people. And it was awesome, because I felt like I won the lottery that day when we had weigh-ins, because Liz Craven and I were both going to go for the world record in the squat. I knew that. So for the first time ever, I was like, please let me have a high lot number. Please let me have a high lot number. Because I wanted to be able to go second. And I had gotten my feet a little bit off on my second attempt squat. And I came off, and Matt and Paulie, I was the head coach, but I'd put them in charge because obviously I was lifting. Matt and Polly were looking at me, and I said, I know what I did wrong. Don't worry. Trust me. I got it. Put it on the bar. It's going to be a gut buster, but put it on the bar. And Liz went out and got 156 and had to work for it. And I went for 156.5. And it was the longest, grindiest squat that I've gotten, at least raw. And so that just set the stage. But then I went 3 for 3 in the bench and 3 for 3 in the deadlift. And even though I think I might have placed 5th overall, I felt like that was just the best competition I'd had in years, because I was really under pressure. I had to fix things. It was to get my world record back. And I just was having a lot of fun. And I was, in the meantime, leading up to that, I had been working, and you all know as coaches, but as the head coach for the national team, I had not only been training, but I'd been trying to lasso everybody in for the entire team because I was the head coach. So that one really sticks out for me because I lifted on the team that I was coaching, but I was also smart enough to hand over the reins to Polly and Matt and took myself out of it because I was like, today I'm not the head coach, you all are. So, to be a good lifter, you also have to be coachable. So I would say that's my proudest one and my happiest memory, at least as of late.
To date, yeah.
To date, well, yeah.
That's pretty impressive though, like to coach and do all the things that coaching entails for a whole team, and then to come in yourself and set a world record squat, go 9 for 9, have your best competition, and what, that was 2017, I believe. Right? So
yes.
I mean, that's, first of all, that's recent. And second of all, like, you've been competing since 91, right?
Yeah, a long time.
So well, I just think that's super cool that, you can compete for such a long period of time and still improve and still, it's not even necessarily about improvement in terms of numbers, but just to say your best moments are ahead. Like, I think that's, maybe it's just kind of reflecting where I'm at in my life right now, but I think that's pretty cool and an inspiring thing.
And, there's also another thing. You see people who step away from competing or put it on a semi-back burner and for different reasons. But if you really, really love the iron game, it doesn't mean you can't come back and kick butt. I mean, look at Dave Ricks. He took off, I would say, almost 10 years when his wife was battling cancer, and praise the Lord, she's cancer-free. He took a lot of time off from the iron game, and then he came back, and when he was 56, he had the open world record in the squat for the guys. So we go through different injuries. I took a year off right after I'd won the open worlds because I had a neck thing, and it took me years to get back to where I'd been because there were certain things I couldn't do because of my injury. But if you really love the sport and you're patient and you listen to your body, you can come back and be better, and don't use age as an excuse. Certain things do start to hit you. It's more like wear and tear on your tires. If you take time off or you back off, you can actually give your joints and your muscles some time to heal. I think part of the things that I'm going through now isn't necessarily because I'm 50, but because I've been competing for 29 years. But still, they're just like aches and pains. They're not big things. So I would encourage you, Mike, and anyone else out there who's stepped away from big competitions for a while, that you don't take that option out of your head to come back and just show people how good you can be. Even if you've taken, a little bit of a step back, I think you can come back and be stronger than ever, because I know you, and you're always focusing on doing things the right way and what can I do to be better.
Thanks. I think maybe I've gotten a second critical attitude adjustment from you, Suzy. So.
I hope that's in a positive way, but
absolutely.
It's, just to encourage you. Yeah.
Absolutely it is. No, I definitely, Anyway, as I said a second ago, I do want to be mindful of your time, and I appreciate. I just really enjoy every time we get a chance to talk. So, thanks for taking the time and sharing what your experience has been, and I think there's useful stuff in here directly and indirectly, and I just really appreciate you talking with us today.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure, and we'll have to get together and we can have one of these talks for as long as you want off the air.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Well, thanks, Dom. Thanks for coming in and helping out and asking some great questions. And thanks again, Suzy. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Thanks, Suzy. Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. I just want to take a quick second here to talk to you about some things that we have coming up at Reactive Training Systems. So starting in April, we're going to be launching another iteration of our classroom. I'll be teaching a class on mesocycles, so if you've ever had any questions on how to design a program, specifically how to design a mid to long-term program, if you've wondered about different periodization models, how to implement some of these concepts, then you might want to check that class out. I'll be teaching all that stuff, and there's homework, which is optional, of course, and then classroom interactions as well. We're also teaching classes on nutrition, on improving your mental game, and then we have classes also from coaches like Blaine Sumner or Jeremy Hartman. And if you want to check any of that stuff out, you would just go to store.reactivetrainingsystems.com and click on the classroom section, and you'll be able to find out basically anything that you want to find out about it. And as always, you can connect with me at Mike Touchier on Instagram, or Mike Touchier basically anywhere social media happens. And that's all I've got for you this time around. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Reactive Training Systems.